Ambassador Yent of the Zalarian Commonwealth stood in his crystalline communication chamber, his 4 delicate arms trembling as he composed what might be his people's final plea for survival. The chamber's transparent walls offered a panoramic view of his homeworld's capital city, where millions of his fellow Zalarians moved through their daily routines, unaware that their entire civilization teetered on the edge of extinction. Through the chamber's ceiling, he could see the evacuation ships launching in steady streams, sleek, silver vessels carrying refugees from the free border worlds that were already burning under Korthak bombardment. The sight made his large, gentle eyes fill with tears that sparkled like liquid diamonds in his species' unique way of expressing grief. The Zalarians were a people of beauty and learning. Their cities were works of art, their libraries contained the wisdom of millennia, and their greatest achievement was a comprehensive philosophy of peaceful coexistence that had guided their civilization for over 10,000 years. They had no standing army, no weapons of war, no military tradition whatsoever. Their defense forces consisted of barely trained militia members whose primary job was disaster relief and space traffic control. Now the Korthak Empire had declared them an obstacle to expansion and launched a war of complete extermination. To any civilized species willing to assist, Yent began, his melodic voice wavering as he recorded the desperate message. The Korthak Empire has launched a war of total annihilation against our people. 3 of our outer worlds have already fallen to their advanced forces, and our scouts report their main battle fleet approaching our core systems. He paused, watching through the chamber's sensors as another wave of Korthak fighters swept through the outer spiral colonies. The alien warships were brutal, efficient killing machines, angular black vessels that looked like flying daggers designed by someone who hated the very concept of beauty. They didn't just destroy military targets. They systematically burned libraries, museums, schools, and art galleries. The Korthak didn't just want to conquer the Zalarians. They wanted to erase every trace that such a peaceful civilization had ever existed. We are scholars and artists, not warriors, Yent continued, his 4 hands clasped together in the traditional gesture of humility his people use when asking for help. Our greatest weapons are philosophy and poetry. Our strongest defenses are diplomatic treaties that the Korthak have ignored completely. We desperately need technical advisors and perhaps some defensive equipment to help our militia hold strategic positions until reinforcements can arrive from our allies. The truth was that reinforcements weren't coming. The Zalarian Commonwealth had many friends throughout the galaxy, but they were all peaceful species like themselves. The Aquatic Poetry Collective had offered to write moving verses about Zalarian bravery. The Crystal Singers promised to compose symphonies in their memory. The Garden Worlders sent thoughts and prayers. None of them had militaries capable of fighting the Korthak war machine. Yente's aide, Sub-Ambassador Krell, entered the chamber carrying data tablets that contained intelligence reports on potential military assistance. So, I reviewed the databases of species that might be able to help. Most civilizations capable of fighting the Korthak are either too far away or unwilling to get involved in what they consider a regional conflict. What about the newcomers? Yent asked. The species from the Outer Rim system, the humans. Krell consulted his tablet, reviewing the limited information they had on humanity. They were recently contacted through standard diplomatic channels. Limited data available, but intelligence suggests they have some military experience. Their home system is classified as unusually dangerous, which might indicate combat capability. The Zalarians had heard scattered reports about humans from other species. They were apparently from a world so hostile that it had shaped them into survivors, and they'd recently achieved faster-than-light travel. Some sources suggested they'd been involved in conflict with pirates and raiders in their local region of space. Perhaps they could spare a few dozen advisors and some basic weapons, Yent mused. Even primitive assistance might buy us enough time to evacuate our civilian population and establish a government in exile. His request was modest, just enough help to organize a fighting retreat that might save some of his people's cultural treasures and give their children a chance to preserve Zalarian civilization some way safer. He'd heard that humans understood the concept of helping refugees, and their combat experience with pirates might translate into useful tactical knowledge. The message was transmitted through quantum communication networks, reaching every known civilization within range. Most species sent polite regrets or offers of humanitarian aid after the war was over. The response from the human government was different, brief, professional, and immediate. Message received and understood. Support package en route. Prepare for full tactical integration. Admiral Jessica Williams commanding. Estimated arrival 7 to 2 hours. Yen felt relief wash over him like cool water on a burning day. A few advisors and some equipment might make the difference between total extinction and managed evacuation. At minimum, human military experience could help his militia make the Korthak pay a higher price for their aggression. He shared the good news with his staff, who began preparing to receive what they assumed would be a small advisory mission. They prepared quarters for perhaps 50 humans and cleared landing space for a few cargo ships carrying defensive weapons. None of them understood that asking humans for military support was like asking a volcano for a little warmth, impossible by definition. When humans heard that a peaceful civilization was facing genocide, their response wasn't measured assistance. It was overwhelming, comprehensive, and designed to ensure the problem never happened again. The Zalarian Commonwealth was about to discover what human-scale military support actually looked like. Admiral Jessica Williams sat in the Strategic Command Center at Terra Military Headquarters, surrounded by holographic displays showing real-time intelligence feeds from across human space. The facility was a marvel of military engineering, an underground complex that could coordinate operations spanning multiple star systems while withstanding direct nuclear assault. Right now, every screen in the room was focused on a single crisis developing in a distant sector. The Zalarian distress call had arrived through standard diplomatic channels just 6 hours ago, and Williams had immediately pulled together a senior staff to assess the situation. The intelligence brief painted a clear picture, a peaceful civilization of scholars and artists facing complete extermination by an aggressive military empire that saw genocide as routine policy. General Robert Miller, she called her ground forces commander, a veteran of 3 major colonial conflicts who understood the human approach to military intervention. We have a genocide in progress. I want the 3rd Fleet ready for deployment within 24 hours. Miller looked up from the tactical displays showing Korthak fleet movements. Admiral, the Zalarians are only asking for advisors. How many technical specialists are we sending? Williams activated the main holographic display, showing the full scope of what she was authorizing. 50,000 Marines from the 2nd and 4th Divisions, plus complete air support, orbital bombardment platforms, carrier groups, and enough firepower to end this war permanently. No half measures when innocent civilians are being systematically slaughtered. The scale of the human response was already taking shape across multiple star systems. At Lunar Base, the massive orbital shipyard began preparing the 3rd Fleet for immediate deployment. The fleet hadn't been fully activated since the Outer Colony Wars, but every captain knew their role in humanity's largest military formation. Captain William Turner, commanding the flagship Devastator Asterisk, received his orders while reviewing personnel rosters. All hands, this is the captain. We're deploying to prevent genocide against the civilian population. Full combat readiness in 18 hours. This is not a drill. Colonel Patricia had coordinated the logistics from a position at Central Command, managing the movement of personnel, equipment, and supplies across dozens of worlds. Her screen showed cargo ships loading everything from medical supplies to orbital defense platforms, while transport vessels prepared to carry the largest expeditionary force in human history. Admiral, we're looking at moving 200 capital ships, 15,000 support vessels, and enough ground forces to occupy a medium-sized star system, Hayes reported. The logistics alone will require temporarily redirecting half our merchant fleet. Approved, Williams replied without hesitation. Pull whatever resources you need. When humans commit to military intervention, we don't do it halfway. President Michael Johnson authorized Operation Shield Wall from the Oval Office, surrounded by his cabinet and military advisors. The briefing had been straightforward. A peaceful alien civilization was facing extermination, had asked for help, and would receive the full weight of human military power in response. Madam Secretary, Johnson addressed Defense Secretary Lisa Brooks, I want congressional notification within the hour. Full authorization for humanitarian military intervention under the Galactic Protection Protocols. The mobilization was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Across human space, reserve units activated, shipyards work around the clock, and entire logistics networks shifted to support the massive deployment. The 3rd Fleet alone consisted of 200 warships, from massive dreadnoughts capable of cracking planets to fast attack craft designed for surgical strikes. Major Jennifer Davis led the advanced reconnaissance teams preparing detailed battle plans based on available intelligence about Korthak military capabilities. Their technology is roughly equivalent to our pre-FTL era, she reported to the command staff. Basic energy weapons, conventional armor, no advanced defensive systems. This should be straightforward. The human war machine moved with practiced efficiency that spoke to decades of military operations across the frontier. Automated loading systems transferred massive amounts of equipment, while human specialists prepared for every conceivable combat scenario. Admiral Thompson, commanding the carrier group Enterprise *, supervised the loading of atmospheric fighters designed for ground support operations. We're carrying enough firepower to provide air superiority over multiple worlds simultaneously, she noted while reviewing the deployment orders. The intelligence analysis painted a clear picture of what humanity was committing to fight. The Korthak Empire was a typical aggressive expansion-based civilization that used superior numbers and brutal tactics to overwhelm peaceful neighbors. They were experienced at fighting farmers and artists, not professional militaries. Enemy force composition suggests they've never faced coordinated resistance, reported Colonel David Mitchell from the Intelligence Division. Their tactics are designed for terrorizing civilians, not engaging military targets. This will be a textbook demonstration of professional military power versus organized barbarity. To the human preparing the response, this was a standard humanitarian intervention. They'd faced similar situations during the Outer Colony expansion, when human settlements were threatened by various hostile forces. The response was always the same, overwhelming force applied with surgical precision until the threat was permanently neutralized. Captain Diana Foster, commanding a marine assault ship, addressed the troops during final preparations. We're going to stop a genocide and protect innocent beings who can't protect themselves. That's what humans do. That's who we are. The deployment represented everything humanity had learned about military operations during their expansion across the stars. When faced with threats to innocent life, humans didn't send advisors or limited aid. They sent everything necessary to solve the problem completely and permanently. As the Third Fleet prepared for departure, Admiral Williams reviewed the final mission parameters. The Zalarians had asked for a few dozen advisors and some basic weapons. They were about to receive the most comprehensive military intervention in galactic history, delivered by a species that had never learned to think small when lives were at stake. The galaxy was about to learn what human-scale military support actually looked like. Ambassador Yen stood in the central observation deck of the Zalarian Commonwealth's orbital monitoring station, surrounded by his senior staff who were watching the sensor displays with growing confusion. They had prepared a modest reception for what they expected would be a small convoy of human ships carrying perhaps 50 advisors and some basic defensive equipment. Instead, space itself seemed to tear open as the largest military fleet in recorded galactic history emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation above their homeworld. "Sir," his aide Krell stammered, staring at instruments that were struggling to process what they were detecting. The sensors are registering over 200 distinct signatures. The computer keeps resetting the count because it assumes there's a malfunction. The lead vessel that emerged from the swirling hyperspace portal was beyond anything in Zalarian experience. The flagship Retribution stretched nearly 15 kilometers from bow to stern, its hull bristling with weapon systems that the Zalarian computers couldn't even identify. Behind it came wave after wave of human warships, battleships, cruisers, destroyers, and carrier vessels that launched clouds of fighters like angry hornets. "This can't be right," whispered Dr. Leff, the Commonwealth's leading military analyst. "We asked for technical advisors. This looks like they are planning to conquer the entire sector." The human fleet deployed with mechanical precision that spoke of tremendous experience in large-scale military operations. Battleships took positions that would allow them to provide orbital bombardment support for multiple worlds simultaneously. Carrier groups established patrol patterns that created an impenetrable defensive screen. Support vessels began setting up logistics networks that could supply a major war. Ambassador Yentha's communication system chimed with an incoming transmission from the human flagship. The main display showed a woman in crisp military uniform whose calm professionalism was somehow more intimidating than any aggressive posturing would have been. "Ambassador Yenth, this is Admiral Jessica Williams of the Third Fleet," she announced with a matter-of-fact tone of someone discussing routine business. "We're here to provide the requested military support. Prepare to receive our advanced coordination teams for immediate tactical integration." Admiral Williams, Yenth managed, still staring at the massive fleet filling the space above his homeworld. "There seems to be some misunderstanding. We only requested a few advisors and perhaps some defensive equipment. Admiral Williams looked genuinely puzzled by the comment. "So, you reported a genocide in progress against civilian populations. This is our standard humanitarian intervention response. We're prepared to provide comprehensive military support until the threat is permanently neutralized." Before Yen could respond, the human operation began with efficiency that made his people's best military exercises look like amateur theater. Captain William Foster led advanced reconnaissance teams that immediately began establishing orbital superiority over every Zalarian world in the system. Within minutes, human sensor networks had mapped every Korthak position within 50 light-years. All Zalarian forces, this is Captain Foster, the human advance guard, came to transmission on military frequencies. "We are assuming operational command of this theater. Please provide current tactical assessments and prepare to coordinate with human ground forces." Major Jennifer Brooks deployed Marine Battalion from massive transport ships that looked like flying cities. The humans didn't just land troops. They established complete forward operating bases with the speed of a military machine designed for exactly this purpose. Automated construction systems built airfields, command centers, and supply depots faster than Zalarian engineers could have drawn the blueprints. "So," reported Colonel Hayes from the Human Logistics Command, "we've established secure communications with all Zalarian military units. Our advanced teams are integrating their forces into our operational structure. Estimated time to full tactical readiness, 4 hours." The humans didn't just provide support. They assumed complete operational control, treating the Korthak Empire as a problem to be solved rather than an enemy to be fought. Human officers politely but firmly took command of Zalarian defense positions, upgraded their equipment with technology that was decades more advanced, and began implementing battle plans that treated the coming conflict as a routine military exercise. Admiral Thompson, commanding the carrier group Enterprise*, deployed atmospheric fighters that established air superiority over 12 worlds simultaneously. "All sectors reporting ready status," she announced. "Enemy forces are maintaining distance. They appear hesitant to engage." The Korthak forces, who had been advancing steadily through Zalarian space while meeting only token resistance from undertrained militia, suddenly found themselves facing something they'd never encountered before: a professional military that treated warfare as a science rather than an art. Korthak fleet movement detected in Sector 7, reported Lieutenant Davis from the Human Intelligence Division. Their formation suggests they are preparing for traditional bombardment tactics against civilian targets. "Understood," Admiral Williams replied calmly. "Captain Mitchell, please intercept and disable their vessels. We'll need them intact for post-conflict legal proceedings." Within 6 hours of their arrival, human forces had established complete air superiority, orbital dominance, and forward operating bases on 12 worlds. The transformation was so rapid and comprehensive that the Korthak Empire's military leadership was still trying to understand what they were facing. General Wreck of the Korthak invasion force had planned to crush a peaceful civilization of farmers and artists using overwhelming numbers and brutal tactics. Instead, he found himself staring at tactical displays showing the most advanced military deployment his species had ever encountered. "What are we dealing with?" he demanded from his intelligence officers. "Unknown, sir. The force composition suggests they are treating this entire sector as a single operational theater. Their technology appears to be generations ahead of our capabilities." The Korthak, who expected to fight farmers with farm tools, suddenly faced humanity's professional war machine in full deployment. The species that had never learned to think small when innocent lives were at stake had arrived in force, and they were about to demonstrate what human-scale military intervention actually looked like. The humans implemented what they called comprehensive threat neutralization, a military doctrine that treated the Korthak Empire not as an enemy to be fought, but as a systemic problem to be solved through overwhelming application of superior technology and tactics. Colonel David Turner coordinated the operation from the command ship Thunderbolt *, surrounded by holographic displays that showed real-time intelligence from across the entire conflict zone. "All unit commanders, this is Operation Clean Sweep," Turner announced during the final briefing before engagement. "We're not here to win battles. We're here to dismantle their entire military capability permanently. Every Korthak installation, every warship, every supply depot is to be captured or neutralized within 7 to 2 hours. The campaign that followed would be studied in military academies across the galaxy as the most lopsided conflict in recorded history. Human technology proved so vastly superior to Korthak capabilities that enemy forces began surrendering rather than face certain annihilation. The aliens who had built their empire on terrorizing peaceful farmers suddenly found themselves completely outmatched by professional soldiers using equipment they couldn't understand. Lieutenant Lisa Thompson monitored the tactical center aboard the flagship, tracking enemy movements through sensor networks that covered hundreds of star systems simultaneously. Colonel, enemy fleet approaching Sector 7. 43 vessels, including their command dreadnought. They appeared to be moving to attack the Zalarian refugee convoy. Turner studied the tactical display showing Korthak ships moving toward defenseless civilian transports. The alien vessels were massive by their standards, primitive but numerous, designed for intimidation rather than actual combat effectiveness. Admiral Williams, he reported to Fleet Command, "We have Korthak forces moving to attack civilians, requesting permission to engage." Granted, Admiral Williams replied from the bridge of the Asterisk Retribution Star. "Captain Mitchell, intercept and disable their vessels. We'll need them intact for the war crime tribunals afterward." Captain Robert Mitchell commanded the Human Interceptor Squadron that moved to engage the Korthak battle fleet. His 6 destroyers were outnumbered nearly 8-1, but the technological disparity made numbers irrelevant. All units, weapons to disable mode, Mitchell ordered as his ships closed with the enemy formation. Target their engines and command systems. We want prisoners, not casualties. The battle that followed lasted exactly 18 minutes. Human quantum torpedoes phased through Korthak shields as if they weren't there. Precision strikes from plasma cannons disabled enemy weapons before they could fire, and electronic warfare systems seized control of Korthak navigation computers. The entire enemy battle fleet found themselves dead in space, their ships intact but completely powerless. Enemy fleet neutralized, Mitchell reported with professional calm. 0 human casualties. All 43 vessels captured intact. We're detecting approximately 12,000 Korthak personnel, requesting terms of surrender. Major Jennifer Brooks led the ground operations that liberated occupied Zalarian worlds with surgical precision. Her Marine battalions deployed from orbital transports using drop pods that could land troops anywhere on a planet within minutes. The technology was so advanced that Korthak ground forces often surrendered without firing a shot. Landing Zone Alpha secure, Brooks reported as the forces established a perimeter around a Zalarian city that had been under occupation for weeks. Civilian population has been evacuated to safe zones. Enemy forces are laying down weapons and requesting medical assistance. The human approach to ground combat was unlike anything the Korthak had encountered. Instead of the brutal urban warfare they specialize in, human forces used precision strikes, non-lethal suppression weapons, and tactics that protected civilian populations while systematically dismantling enemy resistance. Colonel Patricia Hayes coordinated the liberation of 12 worlds simultaneously from a command center. Status report on Operation Freedom. She requested from her field commanders. All objectives secured ahead of schedule. Came the response from multiple fronts. Korthak military infrastructure has been dismantled. Local governments are being restored with Zalarian civilian authorities. Enemy personnel are being processed for legal proceedings. The transformation was so rapid and comprehensive that Korthak leadership couldn't adapt to the new reality. General Vrek, commanding what remained of their invasion force, found himself surrounded by ships and technology that made his own forces look like museum pieces. "What are your terms?" He finally transmitted to Admiral Williams, his voice carrying the defeat of someone who'd realized he was completely outmatched. Unconditional surrender of all military forces, cooperation with war crimes investigations, and reparations for damages to civilian populations. Williams replied, "You have 1 hour to comply before we resume operations." The Korthak Empire's military response collapsed within 3 weeks. What had been a genocidal war machine capable of terrorizing entire sectors was reduced to scattered groups of prisoners awaiting trial. Human forces had captured their entire fleet intact, secured every occupied world, and established permanent monitoring stations to prevent future aggression. Captain Diana Foster led the final phase of the operation, coordinating with Zalarian authorities to establish new defense agreements. Ambassador Yent, we completed neutralization of the immediate threat. Recommend establishing permanent security protocols to prevent future incidents. The support operation had become a complete transformation of the local balance of power. The Korthak Empire ceased to exist as a military threat, their government surrendered unconditionally, and the entire sector was reorganized under human protection. Zalarian civilians who had been facing extinction were now safer than they'd ever been in their history. Colonel Turner filed his final report with satisfaction. Mission objectives exceeded. Enemy military capability completely neutralized. Civilian population secure. Recommend standard post-conflict reconstruction protocols. The humans had delivered exactly what they promised, military support. They just hadn't mentioned that their definition of support included completely eliminating any possibility of the problem ever recurring. 6 months after the Korthak Empire had been completely dismantled, Ambassador Yent toured what had once been enemy territory aboard the human patrol vessel Guardian Star. The transformation was so complete that he could barely recognize the sector that had once threatened his people's existence. Where brutal Korthak military installations had once dominated planets, he now saw peaceful reconstruction zones administered by joint human-Zalarian peacekeeping forces. Captain Diana Foster, his human escort for the tour, pointed out the various installations they were passing. That used to be the Korthak's primary weapons manufacturing facility, she explained as they flew over a planet that had been converted into an agricultural research station. We're using it to develop better farming techniques for worlds recovering from military occupation. Yen stared through the viewport at sprawling research complexes where Zalarian scientists worked alongside human agricultural specialists. The planet that had once produced weapons designed to slaughter his people was now focused on feeding and healing war-torn worlds throughout the sector. The Korthak had nearly 1,000 military installations across 47 star systems, Foster continued. We've converted most of them into hospitals, schools, research facilities, and infrastructure projects. The former prison worlds are now refugee resettlement centers, helping displaced populations rebuild their lives. The scope of the transformation was staggering. Human engineers had rebuilt entire civilizations using technology and resources that made the former Korthak Empire look primitive by comparison. Worlds that had been strip-mined for military resources were now garden planets with carefully managed ecosystems. Star systems that had been fortified military zones were now peaceful trade routes protected by human patrol fleets. Admiral Jessica Williams met them at the sector's new administrative center, a space station that had been built from scratch to coordinate reconstruction efforts across dozens of worlds. Her office offered a panoramic view of the bustling hub where representatives from numerous species worked together on projects that would have been impossible under Korthak rule. Ambassador Yent, Williams greeted him with the same calm professionalism she'd shown during the war. I trust you're satisfied with our progress on the stabilization efforts. Yent looked around the office, where holographic displays showed peaceful trade flowing between worlds that had been battlefields just months ago. The Zalarian Commonwealth had gone from facing extinction to becoming the most secure and prosperous civilization in their sector of the galaxy. Admiral Williams, he said during their final meeting, choosing his words carefully. When we asked for support, we expected perhaps a few dozen advisors and some basic weapons to help our militia hold defensive positions. Williams smiled with the expression of someone who had heard similar comments from grateful allies before. Ambassador, when humans provide military support, we ensure the problem never happens again. That's just how we operate. We don't see the point in temporary solutions when permanent ones are available. She activated a holographic display showing the current state of the region. Look at what we've accomplished together. Your people are safe. The refugee populations have been resettled. Former enemy worlds are now productive members of the galactic community, and we've established monitoring systems that will prevent this kind of aggression from ever happening again. The numbers were remarkable. The former Korthak Empire, which had terrorized dozens of species for centuries, had been completely transformed into a peaceful, productive region. War criminals were serving sentences in rehabilitation facilities designed to actual reform rather than simply punish. Former military officers were working in civilian reconstruction projects under human supervision. Colonel Patricia Hayes, now serving as a regional stability coordinator, joined their meeting to provide updates on the broader transformation. We've established defense agreements with 17 species who were previously threatened by Korthak expansion. Our permanent monitoring stations ensure early warning of any potential threats, and our rapid response protocols can deploy intervention forces to any point in the sector within 48 hours. The galactic community had taken note of humanity's unique approach to military assistance. Word spread through diplomatic channels a human military support meant complete restructuring of regional power dynamics. The Korthak Empire became a cautionary tale told across the galaxy, while the Zalarian Commonwealth became a showcase of what human protection actually provided. Other species began requesting human-scale military support when facing existential threats. The aquatic colonies, threatened by hostile machine intelligences, specifically asked for the full human response rather than limited aid. The Crystal Gardens, facing invasion by predatory space nomads, requested complete threat neutralization using human protocols. Major Jennifer Brooks, now commanding the sector's peacekeeping forces, reported on the broader implications during their staff meeting. "We're receiving requests for assistance from civilizations across the galaxy. The pattern is always the same. They don't want partial solutions anymore. They want the human approach, eliminate the threat completely and rebuild something better." The transformation had created a new standard for military intervention that other galactic powers struggled to understand. Traditional military aid consisted of supplying weapons and advisors while leaving the fundamental problems unsolved. Human military aid meant identifying the root causes of conflict and systematically eliminating them through overwhelming application of resources and technology. Captain William Turner, overseeing the new interspecies cooperation programs, observed the long-term effects. "We're not just preventing wars anymore. We're creating conditions where wars become impossible. When you rebuild an entire region's economic and political structure around cooperation, rather than competition, conflict becomes counterproductive for everyone involved." The galaxy discovered that when humans offered to help with your war, they didn't just win it. They made sure you never had to fight that war again. The human approach treated military conflict as a systems engineering problem to be solved permanently rather than a temporary crisis to be managed. Word spread throughout civilized space with remarkable consistency. If you're facing genocide, call the humans. Just be prepared for them to solve every related problem you might face for the next 1,000 years. The species that had never learned to think small when lives were at stake had accidentally created a new model for galactic peacekeeping. Ambassador Yen filed his final report with a sense of wonder at what his simple request for help had unleashed. "We asked for advisors. We received transformation. *** the END ***.